In this video, what I wanted to do was just go through some of the videos and courses and resources that I personally found helpful when I was trying to learn some audio programming in various different styles. So if you have any particular recommendations for things that you found helpful and you think other people might do as well, then it would be really cool if you could leave some links to them in the comments for the video. So I'm going to be aiming this mainly, this could, to a certain extent, it could be for people who are coming from a programming background and were interested in moving into audio areas, doing music stuff. But it probably mainly going to be useful for people as a starting point if they're coming from being musicians who do home recording or whatever and want to go into some more technical aspects. So if you're a musician and you're feeling a bit sort of nerd curious, then hopefully this video will be useful to you. So I should say before we get started, I'm not an expert, I'm not a professional audio programmer. I am a developer, but not in the audio. So audio area. So I've only been learning this fairly recently. So if you want to see some of the stuff I have done, I've got a website at whichpig.co.uk. And I've got like various different stuff as well as presets and stuff on it as well. I've also got plugins and various instruments and stuff as well, which are all free to download, as everything there is free if you want to try and check them out. So there's going to be two main categories for programming and different types of programming. So for the plugins, all the plugins are done with C++ and with Juce. And Juce is pretty much the industry standard and most popular class library that audio developers use with C++. So as I'm only using, I haven't got a commercial license to sell them, you will notice there's a little pop-up which comes up saying made in Juce whenever you open my plugins for the first time. So if you don't want that, another option you could go for is iPlug2, which a lot of people swear by and say is very good, but I didn't go with that because, well, one, if you get good enough, all the jobs seem to be asking for Juce, but also there seems to be a lot more videos and a lot more resources and information on using Juce than on iPlug2. But it has been used for some good things. So probably the best known project at the moment using iPlug2 would be the NAM or Neural Amp Modeler, which is very popular plugin with guitarists for emulating guitar amps. So yeah, if you haven't tried that and you're into home recording and play guitar, definitely check it out. So there are some other alternatives. There are different technologies. A few people swear by using Rust, and people have been saying that's going to take off and become really popular for years as well, but it doesn't seem to have so far. So another option, there are some tools which make it easier, which would be, say, like you've got things like, used to have things like Dreamweaver or stuff like that for web programming where you have different components. So there is a tool called Flowstone you can buy, which allows you to do sort of rapid development. So it gives you components which you can basically drag and drop together, and then you can just do bits of script in Ruby to do it. So probably the best known free plugin which has been done using that would be Solaris Free Reverb, which is very, it sounds good and looks good. So you can do good stuff with it, but I haven't gotten into using this because, well, other than having to pay for it, and there's no jobs as far as I know have been advertised in it or any possibilities like that. And it seems to be very much aimed as sort of the people who do like sound design and like building synth patches and that stuff, and they want to take it a stage further. This would be good. But also I found that when you use tools like this, you often don't really understand what's going on underneath all the way. So as soon as you want to try and do something different, you don't know where to start, you can't see how to do it. And as soon as you hit a bug or something doesn't work properly, which happens all the time, and it's really difficult to debug. So I haven't bothered with that for that reason. So The other main section would be the instruments, and these are all Kontakt instruments. So Kontakt again is pretty much the industry standard with KSP. The big issue with that, some people don't like it, is because you have to, if you're doing, you have to buy Kontakt yourself, and then you can make instruments in Kontakt, but then the other people who use them also have to have the full version of Kontakt, unless you pay quite a lot of money to Native Instruments for them to encode it and give you licenses to use it with the free Kontakt player. So I did, just doing this video, I did just have a look at what it is at the moment. So if you want to do a free one, they'll do it for you and put it in Kontakt player for $2,500, but including $1,000 just to have it encoded. So that's really what, a lot of the time when you give away free Kontakt instruments, people were like, oh, it's not really free, is it? You have to have the player. Or they're like, why couldn't you do it so it worked in Kontakt player? It's like, well, it does, it's exactly the same code. It's just you need to give them loads of money to do it. But interestingly, when I looked at this just recently, I hadn't seen this before, because they want to promote, force people to get the latest version of Kontakt all the time. They're actually saying that if you do a free product for Kontakt 7, they'll actually set it all up for you for free. So that's something to bear in mind. I haven't actually got Kontakt 7 yet, because I'd have to go and pay to upgrade the older version of Kontakt I've got. And it's not necessarily best to have the most up-to-date version all the time, because lots of other people didn't. So if you did do a commercial product, you're alienating a large percentage of your potential buyers by having the very latest version and developing the latest version, because then people have got the older version it won't work for. So yeah, there are different factors for that. So if you don't want to go for Kontakt, the best option is going to be Decent Sampler. So you can't do Decent Sampler is done by David Hilowitz, who also does very good tutorials, who I'll talk about later. And yeah, he did, and it's very good what it is, but there are a lot of things you can't do. So bear in mind that's done by one person who's doing it as an enthusiast, whereas Kontakt is something that's been developed by a team of professionals over possibly decades. So there's a lot of things you can't do under the surface in terms of sound design and routing and effects, and you've got all the history of Native Instruments effects you can call on as well. But also, they do keep adding new things to Decent Sampler, but I'm pretty sure you can't do anything like, you can't display the samples and move through them as you play them and do that sort of thing, or you can't have like XY pads where you can change the controls on an XY, X pad and that sort of thing. So there's a lot more things you can do with Kontakt than you can do with Decent Sampler, but you have to pay for Kontakt, and other people have to pay for it as well. So, and also, most people, when they're starting, they're not going to be doing all that kind of stuff as well. They're just going to be happy to get something basic up and going, hopefully just do a bit of simple scripting just to tie things together and perform some basic actions. So you might as well just use Decent Sampler if you're going to start on it. And as I said, David Hilowitz has got some very good videos on starting that as well. So I'd recommend that. So talking about what you might want to choose and why you want to start on, I mean, you probably don't want to start the first thing you want. You're not going to be charging people for to start with. You're going to do free. But in case you do think you might go in that direction recently, I did just watch a video recently by Owen Bullig. So I know him through Piano Book, which does a lot of free Kontakt instruments, which is also a good resource for checking stuff out. He did just give an idea. He's just done his first commercial product, I think, and he's actually using HISE. Yeah, so I didn't mention HISE is another alternative to Kontakt. So this will give you a lot more power, gives a lot more functionality than Decent Sampler, but as well as paying for the license for that, which is $680 a year, you also, as it's built up on top of Juice, it's a class library on top of that class library, Juice, which is also $800. I think that's just a one-off payment. And then also, yeah, another thing I didn't mention is that I'm developing using a PC, and I'm using Visual Studio, which is free, and all the stuff I'm using is free. But I can't build ones for Macs on a PC, so you need to have a Mac. So you need to buy a Mac as well if you want to better develop stuff which is going Mac. But thankfully, Chris from Pelena DSB, which is also a site and YouTube channel worth checking out if you're interested in music tech and stuff, he built them for me on his Mac so I could use it. But because I haven't paid Apple to be registered as a developer for each product, it means that you have to go through a process of authorizing them yourself, which I have got in the help section of my witchpig.co.uk site, which you have to do. But it's like another extra pain where it sort of blocks people from giving away free stuff unless they pay these big companies money. So this is something to bear in mind as well. Right, so far, what I've been talking about is people coming from like a more music direction doing free stuff. But at the same time, if people are watching this and they are experienced programmers and they want to, or something else I should say in terms of the programming to start with, is if you want to start doing the scripting stuff for Kontakt, that's if you're somebody who's done maybe a bit of scripting for like websites or maybe Access or desktop applications, and you're a bit of a music nerd and you like making up patches and recording stuff at home recording, then with some of the videos and some of the tutorials I'm going to recommend later on, I think you should better make a reasonable start on it. But if you go into straight into C++ and doing C++ stuff, unless you've got some experience and knowledge with things like classes and objects and pointers and understand object-oriented code, then you're likely going to struggle with going straight into that. So what I'm going to recommend is to start with simpler stuff and understand it and build up. But this also applies to people who are maybe experienced programmers. So if they're somebody who's used to working with C++, but they fancy moving into audio, is very interested in music and want to go into that, then it's not, you also need to actually understand what it is you're programming. So you can't program something unless you understand all the different steps and all the different components which make it up, and you can explain how they all connect and say exactly what you want to do. So, and you need to be able to do that wherever you're coming from. So I think the best step if people are starting is, if you want to do effects programming, we need to understand what the effects are and how they work. So there's various different websites which give an overview of this, but I've got one in the links on here. So everything I'm talking about here, I am going to put links in the description if you want to check it out. So this is quite a good one where it explains every audio effect and then says what they are, says how they relate to it, and what the controls are that you're likely to use. So this will go through how different effects relate to each other, how they're made up, what their similarities are, and give you an idea of what things you would want to control and how to go about it. Well, not so much how to go, but to give you the starting point which you need to start with. So for an example of how something works, if you wanted to understand, say, how like a wah-wah or an auto-wah works, then what you would need to do is you need to understand that it's basically using like a filter which will boost certain frequencies. So if you're using a pedal, what you're doing is you're boosting a certain frequency range and you're moving that frequency range up and down the spectrum. So if you wanted to be able to create a plugin which did that, and you wanted it to do it automatically, then you would need to have a way of moving the frequency range backwards and forwards. You'd need to say how much you want to boost it. You'd want to say what the curve would be. Then you would want to know figure out what the BPM of the track is from the DAW, and then relate that to the movement so that it fits in with the music. So, and these would just be like off the top of my head as a starting point. So you would need to understand all these things before you can even do anything. So if you're new to programming or scripting at all, then what I would recommend doing to start with is reading through these, playing with the different effects you've got after having read it and think about it. And then what I would do is get a good multi-effects program. So what I'm going to recommend is using Guitar Rig 7. So the reason why you go for Guitar Rig 7, I haven't got the full version of this. I've just got a demo one. So you can just get a demo one for free and it lasts 30 minutes, but this is enough just to be able to play with it and get an eye with it about doing it. And the reason why I particularly choose this over other ones is it shows the signal flow. So you can pick out the individual effects types here and do the other ones, and then have a look at the descriptions, then play with them after having looked at it and think about what it's actually doing. And then what you can do is start going through some of the presets where it's got chains, and then start to see how they all connect together, because also how the effects are combined together and the way they are routed together has a big difference on the sound. And that's what you're going to start doing when you start doing audio programming. So a lot of the different components, something like distortion or EQ, they're actually fairly generic, but what will make it interesting is the way that you combine different things together. So this has got a signal flow which is just straightforward in a straight line here. If I have some I'll just do a few random ones so you see some different ones. That's another straight ahead one. Yeah, these ones are all being straight ahead 4, but you're getting more effects combining in different ways, all in the other ones. Some of these you'll go backwards and forwards, and then some of those you will also use. Yeah, okay, here's a much more complicated one where you're using different pitches and you're using different components and you're splitting it off and routing it. So this will give you an idea of how to do something more complicated. So, and also if you did something like an auto wah, then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to use LFOs or something like a low frequency oscillator to be able to set it to move parameters up and down as well. So you need to understand how to do that and how to get the BPM and do it. But before you even start on doing that and you start going through these, so I mean, before you start doing any of those yourself, just play with this, just have fun with this. You've got half an hour at a time, so just mess about with it, make up some of your own ones. You won't be able to save the presets if it's just on the free one, but you can see how things are routed, you can see how they different relate to you. And then once you've done that, if you've got your other effects, try and reproduce the same chains using other ones, or better still, as a starting point, what I would recommend is actually recreating them using the free components within Reaper. So I've got a load of tutorials I've done myself, so which will show how to do some of these things. So one of the things I was talking about was if you wanted to create like a wah-wah and do a thing like that. So I've got a video on that which shows how to use, how you can set up different effects chains, and you can set up automation within it, how you can use LFOs within Reaper. So if you haven't got Reaper, you can get it's not free, but you can get it on trial for 6 weeks, and then after 6 weeks it just nags you. So I'd recommend trying that. And the reason a lot of people who are starting off in audio programming or interested in technology use Reaper is that it allows you to get under the hood a lot more than other doors. So you can start out more audio programming, and you can do scripting. It allows you to do scripting using Python, Lua, and EL2. And you also have a whole load of effects in there which you can analyze yourself and look at and create your own effects, which are in the JS folder, which a lot of people think is JavaScript. It's not. It's Jesusonic. The JSFX is the actual suffix, and they're done with Lua 2, which is quite a basic scripting language. It's quite limited, but that can be a good point for starting to learn both some scripting and for actually programming some plugins. So these will only work in Reaper. There is actually, I think, a third party outside program you can use which will allow you to open up the JSFX plugins in other doors, but it's really designed for Reaper. So I'd recommend using Reaper. And there's also quite a lot of good tutorials on how to do scripting and get started with actually creating your own plugins within Reaper as well. But what I would start with is to understand how to create ambient chains. So how to create effects chains and stuff. So I've got one here, how to make ambient effects chains. I've got how to do wah-wah, so you can actually create your own plugins and then you can save them as presets yourself. So you're effectively using tools within Reaper to create your own plugins then. And then if you want to see what's possible using the JSFX plugin, some of the best ones, I've got a couple of videos on this. I've got one top 5 free JSFX plugins. There's some really good ones which people have done. There's some more down here. There's another one, 5 more ones. And what else have I got? Yeah, so what I would also do is I've also got some simple plugins on making a first JSFX plugin. So this one here, this video here, shows you how to, all this does is does a volume knob, but it will give you an idea of how they work and what's going on under the surface. And then there's another one which does like a very simple delay one, but then it gives you an idea of how you can expand upon that and how you can do it. And if you watch these other videos on the free ones, we can also get some good free plugins if you're using Reaper, but it'll give you an idea of what's possible. So I only really scratched the surface of it. I only started having a look at it, seeing what's possible. And then as I'm used to programming in other languages, I found that EL2 was very limited, very basic, and I kept wanting to do things and I just couldn't do it with that language. So some of the things I could do with, say, Python, but Python you can only use for the scripting and stuff. You can't actually use it for making the plugins. So I thought that seeing as the C++ is, pretty much the industry standard, I'd be better off putting my efforts into that and doing that. But this is a good way to get a start and get a taste for it. So what I am going to recommend, who does a lot of good videos on scripting and doing more advanced Reaper stuff, and is also doing the courses with Leandro Faccinetti, if that's how you pronounce it. He's done also some courses on JSFX scripting tutorial for beginners. So this is IDDQD sound. So also does a lot of scripting stuff, gives a lot of good Reaper tips, and has got these courses. So this might be a good place to start if you're using Reaper and you don't want to have to get more complicated systems, or you don't want to have to buy Kontakt, you don't want to set up C++ and all that stuff. First of all, maybe have a go at doing some simple scripts for Reaper and then start doing some simple plugins and have a go at that. But if you're going to start going into the scripting, I wanted to find a good course which will give people just a general introduction to, say, procedural programming. So you can create your own functions, so you'll know how to do like if statements, for loops, while loops, select statements and stuff. And one course I would recommend if you want to start programming, so what I would do is break it up a bit, is start doing some sound design, creating my own effects chains, doing some scripts on the other ones. But if you want to actually learn basics of programming which would apply to whatever you go into and you haven't done it before, then what I would actually recommend is on the audio programmer site, which I'm going to come back to here for other tutorials, is there's one called Browser Noise Web Audio Tutorials, which is very good. It's done step by step. It starts right from the beginning. It will build up your programming skills, and all of this is done through the web browser. So this isn't any good for creating like effects plugins or anything. And you can create like some instruments, like people created synths and stuff going through just through the browser, but you can't use them in your DAW or anything like that. So the main practical use for the web stuff would be maybe if it's doing for like online computer games or for educational stuff. So I know the guy who's done this has done a set of courses for universities, which look good. And I know another guy who's done some stuff which was ear training tools. So these were online ear training tools. So, but if you want a good introduction to get actual programming, which isn't really difficult, isn't really boring, it builds up logically step by step, and he's a very good communicator, the guy who does it. I go to the audio programmer on YouTube and go to browser noise web audio tutorials. So yeah, check that one out. Right, so you can make a start on that. If you're more interested in doing the instruments and you want to get started with your audio programming of that, as I said, you can do the Kontakt ones once you've got some. I'd get the basic scripting skills first, and then you can go on and do some Kontakt instruments and you can follow some of the tips. But you might want to do the decent sampler ones first, because it's free and it's going to be simpler. So what I would recommend, I mentioned him before because he created the decent sampler, it's David Hillowit. So as well as being a musician and a programmer, and he's also a very good communicator, very good talker, and he makes really nice videos, really nice stylish videos. So he's got a big range of skills, quite impressive. So there's music production tutorials on here. There's a whole set of Kontakt ones, and in here he's also got videos on how to get started with decent sampler as well. So if you want to start making some instruments, and it's not too difficult to do a simple decent sampler instrument, then this would be another really good place to get started and get going on. If you do want to go into Kontakt and do some more advanced stuff and progress with that, then another courses I would recommend is Stephen O'Connell. I think he is a lecturer in music technology or something. And these sound like very organized, very professional courses, and he goes through how to do it step by step. Definitely recommend his course going through those. And another good set of courses would be Extant Audio. So he does also have a commercial course, which I think is £99, which is more extensive and goes into more detail. So this, you tend to find bits are missing, and it doesn't necessarily tell you anything, but there's still a lot of useful information in this playlist. It's Kontakt scripting tutorials. So this is still really good as well. So I would still recommend this. So Extant Audio, again, all the links are going to be in the description. So the other thing, if you're interested in doing the Kontakt one or a decent sampler, is if you join Piano Book, there's a lot of free ones on this. There's some very good ones. Probably the best one, as I said before, Owen Bullig. Check out his stuff. It's really excellent. But there's a lot of other people. Some of the people he's collaborated with is very good as well. And there's some videos on there how to script piano samples in Kontakt, and there's a lot of free stuff you can download yourself. So the other thing is, if you do have Kontakt, you have a full version of Kontakt, and you have a version which is after the version which they've uploaded is in the instrument, and they haven't locked it down in some way. Some people put passwords or stuff on it, but a lot of the time they don't. Is you can go in and you can look at the actual script yourself, and you can see what it's doing. So you can actually go through the script, take bits out, create your own instrument, chop bits out, remove it, put it back in, and then see exactly what's going on. And you can see how everything is connected underneath. So that's another good way of learning, is to do that. Right, so with the C++ stuff, if you want to start going into that, the best set of tutorials, and there's a variety done by other people, is going to be by the audio programmer. So having said that, you've got a whole load of playlists here. So some of the obvious ones to start with would be, there's one where it's just audio programming for beginners tutorial. This one I would do first because it's just straight even before that. And there's ones on a whole set of Juce framework tutorials, and there's also got guests on it who do some good videos as well, and you can figure out how to do most things from that. So this is an excellent resource, but one thing I would say with a warning to avoid a lot of frustration is if you search for something in an audio program, a video comes up, often the one which comes up is an older version and the things don't work anymore. Very often with these older ones which come up, they come up first because they've had the most number of views. But what you should always do is look through the comments and the description underneath, because you'll quite often say, oh, this doesn't work anymore, this doesn't work anymore. And then somebody else will say, oh, they've got a newer version of this tutorial where it's got the new version on it, or you have to, or if something's changed, it will tell you what's changed and what you have to do. So what he should really do is put a notice on the top saying this is an old version, go to the new version here, or put a warning, because otherwise, I mean, I should know better by now, but I've spent several times, I spent like ages on it, couldn't get it to work. And then I read the comments afterwards and it was like, oh, this is like out of date. But this is the one which showed up as number one in the searches. So that's something to be wary of. Be careful of that when you look through these courses, but there is a lot of good information in it, but some things might not necessarily work. And sometimes you can figure out what they are if you're experienced, but if you weren't that experienced, you wouldn't necessarily be able to, you would just follow the steps and it wouldn't work and then you'd be stuck. So yeah, be wary of that, but this is a very good resource to go to. And also you're going to be introduced through the guest ones, to some other programmers and developers who have their own YouTube channels and stuff, who also have some good stuff, so which you can find out, which can be very helpful. So one of the things with the Juice stuff, so a lot of this is oriented on Juice. There is stuff on other ones like the browser one, but a lot of this revolves around Juice. There is also the Juice have their own website and they have tutorials and startup tutorials, which you would think would be a logical place to start with. But I found that a lot of those hadn't been maintained, and quite a lot of the stuff in the tutorials, it's either quite confusing or it just, the stuff doesn't work anymore. So be a little bit wary of that as well. So with programming language, you do always find there's breaking changes in technologies. And if you're dealing with Microsoft stuff, you might find that something that's 7 or 8 years old, it just stops working. But with Juice, it seems to be the breaking point seems to maybe, you've often they'll change stuff like a year and stuff from a year and a half, which was new a year and a half or current a year and a half ago, won't work. So that's something you've got to be a little bit careful with Juice. So another big resource if you want to learn all the Juice stuff is to just go to GitHub. And if you search on GitHub, you can download the projects and then you can see exactly how they work. And then you can start adapting them or ripping bits off or combining bits or doing bits you like on it. So this is a good site I'm going to put in the link, which is called Awesome Juice. And there's a whole load of stuff which is on GitHub, which are Juice projects. So you've got a whole load of different modules and plugins. You've got templates, instruments. And so a lot of these I haven't even had time to, it take a lot of time going through this, but I have been through some of these. And I would say that probably approaching half of them don't work out the box. But that's often because something's changed. Some of them are quite old on here and the technologies don't work, and sometimes you'll get an error and then you can Google it and then you find you need to get a new version, or you need to update something, or you might just need to change something in the code to get it to work. And sometimes you can do that yourself and it's manageable, but other times I've downloaded stuff and thought, oh, that'd be really good, but I just couldn't get it to work. But sometimes if it doesn't, even if it doesn't work, you can still get an idea through looking at the code of how it should work, and you can still get the idea, and you can start a new project yourself and kind of copy the ideas without literally copying the whole project or all the code. You can just do something in the style of it and get it to work. So this is a really useful learning resource as well. So yeah, I reckon there's about probably more than 50%. If you download them, you open them up in Juice, you open them up in Producer, which is the way you open up normally. We can do it in different ways, but I normally use Producer. If you open up in there, I'll find a lot of them won't work out the box, but some will. And then you can debug them and start to understand how they work. So this is a very good resource. As as well, or just look on GitHub anyway and just look for projects. But this is a page where a lot of them are listed under here, so I'll put this in the description. So another thing which I should just mention, which is very useful for both as a resource for both C++ programming and Kontakt or anything, is Knobman. So this looks very dated, the old site, and I actually use there's a desktop application I've downloaded, and what you can do is you use it to create we can not only create knobs and create your own styles. So if you have a look through this, you've got a whole load of different styles, and you've also got meters, but you could also use this to use gauges. So you could use knobs like that, but you could also use it. Yeah, so here's an example of a gauge, so that you could connect this up to say how loud something is, so it will move up and down. So it's what you actually do is you create like a strip. So it's like an animation strip. So you might have, say, 50 ones where the needle's in slightly different position, and then depending on what, say, the amplitude is, you would move it up and down. So there's videos which explain how to do that on the audio programmer site if you want to learn how to do that, and there's also ones you can do it. So you can use that in Kontakt as well. You do it slightly differently. To give another example of ones, you don't just need to be knobs or small ones as well. So if I have a look at this one here, this is another Kontakt one I did when it comes up. So what you can do is, well, if you click on the buttons, you don't have to actually move them around. You can do it. Another one thing I found useful for actually creating animations is a lot of AI stuff. So in particular, what I've used Midjourney, but I also signed up for a trial for the development for Leonardo. So I got free stuff for that and basically did testing on it. There's Leonardo AI, and it's all done by prompts and stuff, and you can do stuff. So I created like fractal images using that. And then like when you click on them, you can do animations and change it around. But you can also, as well as changing the colors and doing going around, you can also change things like transparency and size, and you can do bigger ones. So this is about as big as you can get. So if I play a note on here, see it goes in and out, and I take it down and then it moves around. So if I do a quick one like that, so I mean, this was all done by taking a basic fractal design which would just look like that, and then opening it up in the free Knobman application, which is a desktop application, and then hooking it up within Kontakt. So yeah, the information is that you'll be able to find that in the tutorial. So on here, if you don't want to make your own ones, there's also a whole load of ones you can just download for free. So you've actually got knobs and sliders and a whole load of different ones on here you can just download and try yourself. So this is another really useful resource. So I think that's really the starting points I really wanted to go through. So I suppose the general gist of it is, don't go straight into the hardest stuff expecting to be an expert straight away. Try and understand and build up. So start with understanding, be able to explain in plain words what it is you actually want to do. And then you can use some tools like in Reaper, you can use the tools and you can set up effects chains and start from that. Then start doing some simple scripts in that. And then you can start doing some plugins and scripts. And once you learn to do basic scripting language, so that browser tutorial one where you can do the online stuff just through the browser would be a very good one to start with. And then from that, you can start doing some Kontakt or decent sampler instruments. And then if you feel brave, then you can start moving into going through some of the tutorials on, say, the audio programmer, and start maybe setting up Juice or set up C++ with Visual Studio if you're on a PC, or VX Code for a Mac. And then you could use class libraries like Juice or iPlug2 and start developing some VST or AU plugins for use indoors, and just gradually build it up, and you'll have a lot more fun doing that. So if you get stuck with anything, you get frustrated, there are a lot of forums you can go on, you can ask people. The Juice forum is actually very good, so you can go on there and there's people who will help. The Kontakt ones, there's if you search for that and Google it, then probably 90% of the time the answers will end up being answered by a guy called Evil Dragon, who's very helpful. There's also various Facebook groups for programmers and stuff as well. But yeah, I'd say build it up and just have fun with it. If something gets frustrating or difficult, just leave it and come back to it and go and do something more fun instead, and then come back to it. And then quite often you leave something, you come back to it, and you'll think, oh, right, I get it now. So yeah. So hopefully this has given you some ideas. As I said, if other people are watching this and they're thinking, oh, I've got much better courses than this, I'd recommend this, do that. One thing I haven't mentioned is books. So I have had a look at some of the books. Generally, I would say computer programming books are very boring and expensive. And the ones available for programming audio ones seem to be very expensive. So if anybody's got any books that they did find useful and they do think is worth the money and are still up to date, the other problem is they go out of date very quickly. And then you can't read the comments. It's not like a video where you can read the comments and people say, oh, that doesn't work anymore, go and do this instead. But if anybody has any other resources, whether they're books, websites, videos, anything, please put them in the comments. So hopefully, yeah, this has been some use to you and given you some ideas. And thanks for watching, and maybe subscribe and check out some of my other videos. Oh, and if you want my plugins, if you want to try some free Kontakt instruments and plugins and stuff, you can go to Witchpig. Go back to witchpig.co.uk. And yeah, I've got a whole load of free stuff there you can try out as well. Okay, so cheers. Thanks for watching. Bye.